Welcome back to the Matt and Matt podcast. The date is April 14th, 2015. Let's get it started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Matt and Matt podcast. I am, as always, Matthew Nogue, joined, as always, by Mr. Matthew Cabrera.
Howdy, everyone. Howdy.
And as always, which I have, if you're keeping track at home, that's the third time I've said as always, make it 4. We're joined by a special guest today, Mr. Nick Scalca. Welcome to the podcast.
Woohoo.
Yes. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours. So now, NHL playoffs about to get started. As I said, April 14th. So we are just a day away from the first series starting. If we can go back really quick, last time on the podcast, I believe it was I who predicted that Ottawa would make the playoffs and that the Caps would have the second seed, Mr. Cabrera. You did not believe the Caps would make it out of the wild card spot. So I guess I have to say that I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Well, you got me there. I had my doubts, but you know what? They
Hamburglar, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, they came out on top. They did what they had to do, and you know what? I'm glad I'm wrong.
As I said on last week's podcast, now that the Ottawa Senators are in the playoffs, find out the biggest distributor of hamburgers in Ottawa buy stocks because those burgers will fly off the shelves when Hammond is starting in Ottawa. I'm telling you, it's true. It's gonna happen. But now it's time to get down to the nitty gritty. NHL playoffs 2015 about to get started. Everyone's making their brackets, and we got a lot of really good first round games. What we're gonna do here is we've all made brackets, or if we haven't, we're just gonna rattle them off the top of our head. Including a bracket from our super secret special guest, William Nogue, who is yet to make a return appearance, but he will soon. But he sent me in his bracket as well. So we're going to go through these 4 brackets really quick, and then we're going to go look at a couple of these matchups here individually in the first round.
Sounds good.
Cabrera, do you want to do your bracket first?
Sure. Why not?
Actually, no.
Okay.
Let's have our special guest, Mr. Nick Scalca. Would you like to share with us your opening your bracket for the 2015 NHL playoffs?
I would love to, and this one was caused me some internal toil, as they like to say.
I was promised this would be a fantastic bracket with surprises up and down.
Would you like just the Stanley Cup?
Go ahead. You can first give us the Stanley Cup, and then you can go ahead and run through all of the series, just who would win each series.
Okay. All right. Well, my biggest challenge picking was actually the Nashville-Chicago series, in which I feel like the winner of this series will win the Western Conference. I picked Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I got Montreal out of the East.
Ooh.
I got Carey Price out of the East because he's taking them the entire way, and I have Montreal over Chicago in the final.
Whoa. What do you see that going 7 games?
Quick, I got Minnesota upset over St. Louis.
Ooh.
Chicago. Anaheim to beat Winnipeg. I did change my mind, Mr. Cabrera.
Ooh.
I got Vancouver all the way because it's the best city in the world. Montreal. Everyone's picking the Lightning. I'm on board with Detroit. I got the Powerhouse Rangers, and I got my hometown Caps.
All right.
I got Chicago, Vancouver in the Western Conference Final. I got Montreal Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final, and Montreal over Chicago.
All right. I'm on board.
Interesting.
Yes, I know.
Well, I don't like Montreal.
You don't like Montreal?
Just as a team. Not a fan of them. Not a fan of people.
East all year, and their conference is tough. Their little division, as I may say, is tough.
Yeah. I don't like the players on Montreal. I think they are.
I don't like the way it's spelled. I don't like that it's Canadians or Canadians.
I don't like the people who live in Montreal.
I don't like the mayor of Montreal. Yeah.
Cabrera, would you like to rebut with your 2015 Stanley Cup playoff predictions?
Sure, I'll rebut.
Actually, no.
In the Western Conference,
go ahead.
I've got in the Western Conference. I have St. Louis over Minnesota in 6.
Okay.
Nashville over Chicago in 7.
That okay? I think if anything that's going to go 7, but okay.
Anaheim over Winnipeg in 5.
All right.
Calgary over Vancouver in 7.
Boo!
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah.
Hang on. Give me just 1 second.
It's not that hard. Okay. Well, anyway.
Yeah, sorry. You had to cut that really quickly.
Okay.
I was needed somewhere. So,
I'm going to make a timestamp note on my notes here.
Okay, you make a note?
I will do that.
Sorry about that. That's awkward.
All right, continue.
Okay. Let's see. Where was I?
You just finished the Western Conference.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the Eastern Conference. I have Montreal over Ottawa in 7. Tampa Bay over Detroit in 6.
Uh-huh.
New York over Pittsburgh in 5.
Okay.
And the Caps over the Islanders in 6. Thus, leading us to the second round, I have St. Louis over Nashville.
All right.
Calgary over Anaheim. And that leaves St. Louis and Calgary in the conference final. In the East, Montreal over Tampa Bay. New York over Washington. That's Montreal and New York in the conference final. The Rangers and the Blues in the Stanley Cup final, with the Rangers taking it all.
Rangers, Blues, Stanley Cup final. Yeah. That's actually, believe it or not, I was looking at some of the Experts Cup predictions. I think the most common winner of the Stanley Cup was the Chicago Blackhawks, which is interesting for a team seeded that low. And the most common Eastern Conference team, obviously, was the Rangers. Them having the number 1 spot. Let's go ahead. I'll take a look at my bracket now. First and foremost, the bottom left of the bracket, which consists of Anaheim, Winnipeg, and Vancouver, Calgary. I think top to bottom, those are the closest. That's the closest group of 4 of any of the brackets. Because Anaheim and Winnipeg's been playing really well lately. I didn't know this until I did some research. Winnipeg's been on fire recently. I think that's going to be quite a series. But regardless, let's take a look at mine. I'm going to start in the West as well. I've got St. Louis over Minnesota in 7 because they are nearly identical teams. Minnesota's pretty hot, but I think St. Louis has a little bit more experience, and I think they're finally ready to move on to the second round with some confidence. So I'll give them that in 7. Chicago, Nashville is really tough, but I'm going to go Chicago in 6. I think they're very good top to bottom. They're very deep. Anaheim, Winnipeg in 6. I have that right now. Also, by the way, I might change my bracket.
That was an entire series you just named. Anaheim and Winnipeg in 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. Because Anaheim's just too high-powered for Winnipeg. They're good and they're hot, as I said, and a lot of people are predicting a possible upset by Winnipeg. I just think they're too good in Anaheim to mess up, even though they lack goaltending, which is what I'll get to later. I have, in 7 games, Vancouver versus Calgary. I'm going with Vancouver on that one. I don't know, man. They're looking pretty good, and they don't have Luongo anymore. That might be the secret thing they were looking for.
Ryan Miller, Eddie Luck.
They are. That is quite a goaltending pair, actually. Anyway, over to the East. My biggest upset. I've got Ottawa beating Montreal in 7. I've got Tampa Bay over Detroit in 7. I've got the Rangers-Pittsburgh series going 6 with New York taking the cake. I've got the Caps and Islanders going 6 with the Caps taking the cake. Let's go back to the West now. We've got St. Louis, Chicago. I'm taking Chicago over St. Louis. I don't think St. Louis has got what it takes to make a deep playoff run. They just don't seem. I don't know. They don't. Eye test does not show me Stanley Cup contender with them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anaheim, Vancouver. This was the hardest decision for me to make. I still got to go with Vancouver. I don't trust Bruce Boudreau in those big games. And I think Ryan Miller, Eddie Lack, as Nick said, they're stout, man.
I agree.
I'm taking Tampa Bay over Ottawa.
You don't agree. You took Calgary.
Get out of here, you Flames fan.
The thing is that Anaheim isn't going anywhere past the second round.
There are
Yes.
There are too many Canadian teams in these playoffs.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Anyway, so Tampa Bay over Ottawa. Ottawa's good, and I think they'll upset Montreal, but I don't think they have what it takes to beat a team like Tampa Bay. I think if they can beat Detroit, which I predicted they would, I think they've got a good chance at moving on pretty far. And I'm taking hometown Caps over the Rangers. That means conference finals. Chicago, Vancouver. Give me Chicago. Tampa Bay, Washington. I'm taking Washington. Blackhawks, Capitals, Stanley Cup final. It's a repeat of the Winter Classic, fellas. Caps are winning the 2015 Stanley Cup.
Wow.
I know I've predicted that the last 4 years, but I think I got a good feeling about this one.
Well, you know what they say, fourth time's the charm.
That's true.
Yeah, they say that.
Yeah.
Who says that? Who says that?
All the people.
And now let me very quickly move on to the last playoff predictions by my brother. I'm going to zoom through these. I'm going to read all of his explanations. So, first, I had to check the time. First and foremost, Ottawa rides a hot Hammond and defeats underperforming Montreal squad that has been essentially 100% reliant on the play of likely Hart winner Carey Price. All right, I can see that. Tampa Bay simply overpowers Detroit and beats an understaffed Red Wings team that doesn't have a real set-in-stone goalie. That's true. I'm not sure I'd go against that. They still have a pretty good staff regardless, I'd say. New York beats Pittsburgh team that barely clawed its way into the playoffs and can't go anywhere with the disseminated blue line it has in Marc-Andre failure. Washington takes advantage of a shaky Halak and rides Braden Holtby to outlast one of the best puck possession teams in the NHL. So a little bit of William trying to make the Islanders seem good, even though he said they would get destroyed. St. Louis proves why they won the division by beating Minnesota team that isn't quite deep enough, particularly in net. Even though Devin Dubnyk has been having a fantastic year. Let's see, that was St. Louis. Chicago ekes out a victory against an underrated Nashville team that admittedly has struggles of late. Only way Nashville wins is if Kane can't play or if Rene steals it. Ducks blow up a Winnipeg team that really shouldn't even be there. Andre Pavlik? Yeah, right. Calgary beats a Vancouver team because Vancouver has the unfortunate disadvantage of being Vancouver. All right. Well, okay. Ottawa's Hammond Magic runs out against the powerful attack of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He didn't say the Lightning. I added that to make him not sound stupid. Tampa's D and goalie is too strong for Ottawa's lacking offense. New York outlasts Washington in a hard-fought 7-game series if Lundqvist can be outstanding. If he isn't, Caps will win, but he usually is. New York is too deep this year. If they play their potential, if they play to their potential, they should win. St. Louis beats a battered Chicago team with their deep squad. A lot will depend on the strength of St. Louis's D and goalie. Anaheim's blast Calgary team, which much like Ottawa lacks their top-tier offense. If the Rangers make it this far, I expect them to make the finals. Tampa's inexperience could hurt them there. Same with the Ducks. If their team is strong enough to make it to the finals, I think you see them toppling the probably overall better Blues with high-octane scoring, assuming goaltending is stellar. New York beats Anaheim because of defense, Lundqvist, and you would assume Rick Nash's offense. That being said, I see plenty of opportunity for Washington. They can beat the Rangers. Tampa would really be tough in the finals, though. But you beat the Rangers, and you can go to the ship. The end. Essentially, his finals, he's got New York and Anaheim.
Okie dokie.
Based on defense and stuff. So, Cabrera.
Yes.
Of all of these series, which one was the hardest for you to choose in the first round?
It's tough to say. I really think I'm going to go to the Western Conference.
All right.
I think Vancouver, Calgary, definitely probably one of the harder ones. But I think I don't know. I just have an intuition that Calgary is just going to take the lead. And I think Nashville and Chicago was also a tough one to predict. But I like Nashville because of Peter Laviolette and his coaching.
Peter Laviolette's done a fantastic job this year.
And Pekka Rinne in goal. He's very, very underrated, but very good. I don't know. With the Nashville having that 7th game in Nashville, I think that's going to be the icing on the cake for them. It'll go to 6. Chicago wins game 6. I think each team will win their game at home in that series. That's my bold prediction.
That's your bold prediction?
Yes.
Mr. Scalco, what would be your bold prediction, I guess? I know I'm kind of putting you on the
bold
spot.
prediction.
He's had a couple of predictions in general that have been pretty bold. But
my bold prediction is that Detroit beats Tampa. Everybody's talking about Tampa, and that doesn't get you well in the playoffs, as we Capital fans know.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone's picking Tampa. They got a hot offense, but that doesn't win it in the playoffs. So I'm taking Detroit. They got experience. No one's seeing that coming. Nobody's seeing that coming.
You know, Detroit's they remind me a lot of the St. Louis Cardinals in the MLB. They always seem to make the playoffs, and they no matter who they've got, they always just seem to make it work.
And then
the Giants too.
Relatively new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. I would say bold prediction is that Pittsburgh, New York goes more than 5 games. I mean, let's be honest, Pittsburgh fell ass backwards into the playoffs. And, I mean, they aren't playing that well. Yes, it is a rivalry against New York, but I look at this Penguins squad a lot like the Rangers squad of, I believe it was 2011 when the Caps beat them in 5. Caps were number 1 seed. They would go on to lose to Tampa Bay in 4 games the next series, in an atrociously played 4-game series. But I see that a lot like this. Yes, it is the rivalry, and everyone expects it to be close, but I think the number 1 seeded New York Rangers are going to look to make a statement, and they're going to make it. But I think Pittsburgh hangs on to win a couple. And honestly, I believe that's a decent, bold prediction considering how lopsided the series. It might be the most lopsided series in the entire playoffs first round.
I think so. Yeah, the Penguins are injured. They're all like
As are the Islanders. Now, let's move to a single series, and I guess something that we all know: the Capitals and the Islanders. First game is tomorrow, 7 p.m. at Verizon Center, thanks to a win by the Columbus Blue Jackets in the shootout.
Yes.
And funny enough, the Columbus Blue Jackets Twitter account after that game said, "At Washington Capitals, you owe us pizza and beer." And I'd give them all the pizza and beer they want after that one. That was big. But if you're looking up and down the Washington Capitals roster, obviously you've got the role players that need to show up, like Ovechkin and Carlson in a series that's going to be very heavily determined by how we can stop some of the Islanders' speed, and also, of course, Braden Holtby, who has been performing outstandingly this season. But if you look up and down the roster, who is your X factor, Scalco?
Caps as a whole, I mean, I love it. I love the defense that we haven't had before. I mean, past playoffs we've had guys like Steve Oleski, John Erskine. Get out of there. You're not going to win playoff series with those guys on your blue line. I see 6 strong defenders. Honestly, my X factor is our defense this year. Carlson and Alzner, Green, Niskanen, Orpik, and Gleason. I mean, all 6 of those guys can go up against anyone in the league.
That's right.
We can bash them. And we haven't had that before. We've always had a couple scrubs on D. We have a great power play, which we have this year again. I think all around we can play D and we can score an O. My X factor is the blue line.
Yeah.
I'd have to agree. I think adding Brooks Orpik and Matt Niskanen, huge plus.
Honestly, I remember looking at that over the offseason. We were saying, I don't know, I think this is a huge waste of money. This has been It's a sigh of relief was breathed by a lot of Caps fans when this worked out.
Yeah. I think, did we overpay them? Maybe.
Probably.
I think winning a cup will make it worth it, or at least advancing farther than they have before in the playoffs will absolutely make it worth it. And I think Evgeny Kuznetsov on the forward side is going to be the dark horse in the series.
All right.
He's a great sniper.
Very talented. Did you see that pass he had against Boston?
Yes.
Unreal.
Yeah, that was impressive. But I definitely think the blue line and Evgeny Kuznetsov are going to be the 2 big X factors for the Capitals. And of course, Braden Holtby has to step up. Not a surprise. But the Capitals before, they never really used their size as an advantage. But Barry Trotz, I think, has added more of a physical factor to this Capitals team, and I think that
Curtis Glencross.
Yeah, Curtis Glencross is going to need to step up also.
Tim Gleason too. He's a big grinder. I think adding a defensive core and utilizing their size is definitely going to be huge in the playoffs because
Yeah, Islanders are the admittedly speedier team.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to advocate injury on other players, but I think throwing your body around can be it can take a lot out of.
But I think swing for the knees,
Yeah, just take them out of the hip. It'll be good. But bottom line, I think size is definitely.
Now, I was looking at some pre-series stuff
in this series too.
Yeah,
it's something that they haven't tapped into before. Mm-hmm. They've tapped into it a lot. It's huge. I think it's big, very big.
I was looking at some pre-podcast stuff and pre-series stuff regarding John Tavares, and he is extremely talented. One of I believe he was top 5 in points scored over the season, and he is one of the best puck possessors in the NHL, which is a huge stat used to determine the the goodness of teams and how well they can perform. John Tavares is the big reason why the Islanders are up there, and William, in his picks, as you heard, proclaimed them as one of the better puck possession teams. Interestingly enough, and this plays into my X factors, I believe it's going to be Jason Chimera and Joel Ward because of any two players in the NHL that John Tavares has at least 42 minutes against in his career. Jason Chimera and Joel Ward have the lowest, have him at his lowest possession numbers in his career. He's like possessing the puck around 50% of the time, which is very good. When Chimera's on the ice, he's sitting at 32 or 37.2%. The Caps have some very good grinder players that play very well against Tavares. And I think that those guys, especially guys like Chimera and Ward, are going to be huge in this series. Especially Ward always produces in the playoffs, and I think that's part of the reason why he's getting all these reps with the Ovechkin-Kuznetsov line. But I think that those grinder guys, who are also going to be on the shorthanded, so that's another reason they're going to need to play big, I think that they're really going to be the guys that are going to push this series along for the Capitals.
Yeah.
But I think overall, looking like a decent series for the Caps if everything falls into place.
I think so, definitely. I'm right there with you. There's a certain edge to them that they haven't had before, and I think
had a goalie before.
Yeah.
Oh, true. That's true. We should talk about Braden Holtby.
We won the freaking President's Trophy. We had Theodore, and they pulled him out after like Game 3 and placed him with, I think it was Varlamov, but still, that's not a stable goalie. You got to have a stable goalie throughout the playoffs, and we finally have that.
Yeah. Mitch Korn has done an outstanding job. He did it with Pecorine, came over 1 year. Braden Holtby is a 40-plus game winner who is saving like 92% of his shots on net. It's insane. He's producing at a level that he has never produced before.
And I think the most staggering statistic is the season series against the Bruins.
Mm-hmm.
The Capitals shut them out
entirely. First time in history that I think it's the first time in NHL history that a player has shut out a team for at least 3 games. If the same goalie got 3 consecutive shutouts in a 3-game or more series. I know it's the first time it happened to the Bruins. I think it might be the first time in history it happened. So it just shows the level of play that the defensemen of the Caps can play at. And that Braden Holtby can play at. He has been in the zone recently. Caps one of the hottest teams entering the NHL playoffs. Let's look at another hot team in the NHL playoffs.
Let's do it.
Let's take a look at the Minnesota Wild. They're in a tough series with the St. Louis Blues. And on paper, they are very, very close to each other. Devin Dubnyk, the new kid on the block, as it were, one of the best goalies recently. The Minnesota Wild, I believe after the All-Star game, if not, I think it was the last month or so, the best record in the NHL. Now, obviously, a lot of us picked St. Louis over Minnesota. Who picked the Wild?
Me.
Nick, again, man. He's pulling out all the stops on this one, Cabrera. He's going to have the perfect
I was the
record.
only one, I think. I think you both picked St. Louis.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, very bold of you, Mr. Scalca.
Two good teams.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the Caps in the past years, just always losing.
Yeah.
I always feel like the 1 seeds are prone to lose.
Yeah.
I feel like having games 1 and 2 at home are a disadvantage. I feel like the Blues are up against that. I feel like teams in the playoffs that are good in the regular season have a lot of pressure on them. Minnesota Wild have nothing to lose. They're the lower seed, and they're a good team, and the fans are going to be rocking in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I see Minnesota winning the series.
Yeah.
That's
I think the most staggering statistic about the Wild.
You got picked that one?
They
I think
they have 100 points, and they're in the first wild card spot.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Triple digits, and you manage to salvage a wild card spot. I think that's huge, biggest thing, which is why I think it's going to be. I think this is going to be one of the surprise series in the playoffs. I think not a lot of people. It won't be on a lot of people's radars, but it's definitely something you should keep an eye out for.
And I think
something that I think everyone will be keeping an eye on it anyway.
And then Nogue's going to owe me $1.
It's true. I did bet St. Louis over Minnesota on that one. You also bet $1 on the Calgary-Vancouver series, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that one's already over. Cabrera's going to give me my $1 tomorrow. Vancouver's already won the series.
Oh, well. I don't know how to respond to that. Well played.
I'm not starting the same Shock the World campaign that I had last year, where I was predicting that the Lightning were going to shock the world by going to the finals. I'm not feeling it this year. Although I would say
Montreal in the first round.
I would say of all the low seeds, most prone to be of all the 4 seeds at least in this bracket presented by NHL.com. The best 4 seed and the most likely to win the quote Kansas City Royals award would be the Minnesota Wild, because if they get rolling, I think they're going to have the makeups of a good team. I mean, they've got great goaltending, and I feel like their players are skilled enough to where if they all hit their stride in the playoffs and get really hot, they can be nearly unstoppable. And as it's been proven in the last stretch of the NHL season, they've been beating everyone. And if they continue that hot streak, they can be the next Kansas City Royals and upset everybody and potentially even make it to the conference finals. Now, if they would win, to say they'd win the conference finals might be a stretch, but you could see how it could be possible.
Yeah, I would. I can definitely see that as a realistic possibility.
Now, what's the most staggering stat about this?
I'll tell you the most staggering stat about this is that Minnesota is the number 4 seed, and they have 100 points.
You already said that.
I know, but I felt the need to reiterate
It's so staggering. It's literally causing me to stagger.
Yes.
Now,
stagnating everything.
Now, we've talked about the Capitals, and we've talked about the St. Louis, Minnesota series. I feel like we should talk about the Montreal-Ottawa series. Now, Montreal-Ottawa presents an interesting situation where you have a number 1 seed in Montreal carried by a likely Hart winner, Carey Price. And they're going against an Ottawa Senators team who, again, like the Minnesota Wild, are very, very hot going into this playoffs. Now, what do you guys think about this series overall? Can a hot goaltender carry a, quote, number 1 seed that possibly lacks that upper tier scoring? Or do you think the Ottawa Senators have a legit shot at upsetting with the likes of Andrew Hammond and a rookie like Mark Stone, who's producing at a very high level?
Well, who do you want to go first?
Who do you want to go first?
I'll go first. I'll volunteer as tribute.
Feel free.
Okay. Well, this is the one game that I have between a number 1 and a number 4 seed
Mhm.
that goes to 7 games,
Okay. Yeah.
which I think is pivotal, shall we say.
Matthew Cabrera talking at a staggering 7 words a minute so far.
Pivotal is quite pivotal. And the thing is that it's Montreal. I think has such high expectations, but they haven't been performing that great. But Ottawa, I mean, people don't expect them to do well, but they keep doing well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very good head-to-head matchup because Montreal hasn't been performing well, and I guess that sort of levels the playing field for Ottawa because they're not expected to do well. But as we all know, who doesn't love an underdog?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think there's just something about playing at home that gives you a certain edge, and I think Montreal will take the cake in 7 games. If Ottawa was the higher seed, I would take Ottawa in a heartbeat. But there's something playing at home, especially playing in Montreal, that makes the Canadiens have a certain edge to them over the Senators. That's my 2 cents.
It should be noted that at home, Montreal and Tampa Bay are both exceptional. They both have less than 10 regulation losses at home. Montreal with 9 and Tampa Bay with 8. So they are much better at home than they are away. Although I'd say Montreal is better away overall. Actually, yeah, they're better overall away. But both very good home teams.
Mm-hmm. Scalca.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know my pick. I got Montreal going all the way. I think in the playoffs, hot goalie, hot team.
That's
Bottom
true.
line, Carey Price could be the best in the NHL right now. It's going to be easy to win games when Price is saving, 29 of 30 shots per game.
Yeah, and honestly, teams have been known to just get carried to the conference finals by goaltending, a la Yaroslav Halak, 2010 playoffs.
Yes.
He stops, 40-some shots by the Caps in Game 7? They end up beating the Penguins, going to the conference finals against God knows who, to end up losing, but that's besides the point. But
impressive.
But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Carey Price translates his game into the playoffs against such a hot team. I think if the first game for him is very important, and this goaltending conversation actually leads me into one other thing that I wanted to talk about. Now, Scalca pointed to the Detroit situation and how Tampa Bay is picked by far by too many people, and also the whole Vancouver-Calgary situation. Vancouver and Detroit share a very similar quality, as do some of these NHL teams, wherein they don't have a set number one starter, but they have very talented goaltenders who, if they choose the right guy, may perform at a very high level or may not. Now, do you think that these teams that don't have one set goaltender can still succeed in the playoffs?
Yeah, that's tough to say. I think it, out of all things, I think it boils down to the coaching staff if it's between a goaltender. Because you could have, say, for example, the defense might not be great, but it can get you somewhere. But the net minding is outstanding. I think there's something about the motivation of the head coach behind the bench that triggers something within the players. And I think, you know what I mean. No, you don't.
All right.
Basically, I think I don't think it's possible for a hot goaltender to carry a team to the final. Don't think it's possible.
Really? Because it's happened so many times before. That's literally been the story of the past 8 playoffs.
Yeah, Jonathan Quick. Well, but then again, the Kings were a very, very high percentage possession team, and they were
Yeah, but
very well
Quick was a
coached.
freaking beast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
but
was
still, the thing is
otherworldly
that
in
if
those
you
playoffs.
have
Quick didn't carry him, but he was a beast.
that's my point. The question was, can a hot goaltender carry team?
Lundqvist did it last year.
Yeah, that.
No, but the
Yeah,
Rangers
their
had some
offense
legitimate-
wasn't exactly high octane. They were talented and they were good at moving the puck, but I wouldn't say they were high octane in any sense of the
Year
word.
we won the President's Trophy. Halak was saving 50 shots a game. We were so much better than Montreal. He completely did it, I think.
But the thing is that New York had a fairly legitimate offense. Signing St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
I think, was huge.
Oh yeah, St. Louis.
Yeah, he's a legitimate player.
It's St. Louis. This is America.
I think they had Rick Nash,
Mm-hmm.
who maybe wasn't necessarily performing as well as he was this year.
Didn't they get Rick Nash this year?
No, they had him last year.
Okay, that my mistake.
And a couple years before, I'm pretty sure. And also the emergence of Benoit Pouliot, who's now on the Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
I think was big too. So it's a lot of. I guess goaltending can take you to a final if you have certain players, or at least I think one line that really clicks and can get enough offense. I think if you take a guy like Jonathan Quick or Henrik Lundqvist, they can carry you to a final. If you have certain players that are good enough, but and they click with their line mates, I think that it can take you to a final. If it's just the goaltender and there's not a lot of experience and there's not a lot of well-known names that really know what it's like to play in the playoffs, I don't think a goaltender can put that much of a burden on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think it should be mentioned that I think for me, and I haven't done enough research or I don't know the game well enough to have a super highly informed idea of this, but I feel like in the playoffs, the level of necessity of like talent at certain positions, I'd say number one priority is probably goaltending. Then it's defense, because it's all about how well you can stay in the game. Then I would say after that, it's probably offense. I'd say fourth is special teams, because teams seem to kill penalties fairly a little bit better than usual in the playoffs, or at least I feel like teams seem to play outside of their regular season standings in the playoffs when it comes to penalty killing and power plays. They seem to matter a little bit less. It's all about 5-on-5 play. So I feel like it's that's a real big part of it.
Yeah.
Also, I've got a bold statement. Looking at this bracket, I'm going to say that in the Western Conference, in the top bracket, which is St. Louis, Minnesota, and then Nashville, Chicago, I think any one of those four teams put into any series in the bottom bracket in the West could win.
Yes.
I think that the top half of that bracket is substantially more talented than the bottom half.
Yeah, that division, I mean, total points was like so much higher than the other one. I mean, that was ridiculous. Central over Pacific, I think.
That's a valid point. I'd have to agree. Yes.
All right. Now, before we end this podcast, we're going to take a tiny, quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And we're back with the Matt and Matt podcast. We want to thank Nick Scalca for joining us. He had to head out, but thank you very much, Nick.
Yeah. Yes. Well done, Nick. Thank you, Nick.
Look forward to having him potentially on some future podcasts, maybe the round 2 previews. And
Absolutely.
we are joined for the first time this year, this return, by our super secret special guest, Mr. Wet Willie Wilnoge. Welcome back.
Willie, welcome aboard.
Well, it's
I can't say it's good to be back. All right, so we've discussed your bracket already. I told me what you told me, or I told them what you told me. And first and foremost, can you go a little bit more into the Vancouver-Calgary series? Because I don't feel that Vancouver being Vancouver is a legitimate reason to not pick them.
Well, if you had any brains, all right, I'll do this for those who are less educated. Well, first off, I'll come out and be completely honest. I know next to nothing about how the Vancouver Canucks have played this year. I honestly could not have told you that they were in the playoffs.
It's true.
They've been a very under the radar team, I feel like, and so I haven't seen them popping up on any kind of NHL.com news feed or anything like that. So I haven't been paying attention. I know a little bit about Calgary. I know that they've been kind of hot and cold, and I think relatively hot recently. I know that Jonas Hiller is their goalie, and he has been proven to be a solid goaltender that I think can play at an elite level, but he's just been kind of been through a couple of rough stretches in his career. But he's, an all-star caliber goalie, so he's a playoff guy. And I do know that Calgary has offensive weapons, but as you kind of probably talked about in my bracket, I don't think they have the offensive weapons to beat a team like Anaheim in the semifinal, which I have them, barely getting into. I think the Vancouver-Calgary series can really go either way, but I do think it'll go 7 games. I don't see either of these teams sweeping. The Vancouver goalie situation, it's like we've talked about, like you guys talked about, it's not set in stone, and so I don't think you can be successful if you don't have a guy, who, you don't have to start out with your number one guy for the playoffs, but you can't go through the entire Stanley Cup playoffs rotating goalies. Somebody's going to emerge as the one, and he's going to stay there. So if Vancouver's going to win, one of those guys is going to pop up and be the guy. I don't see them doing it.
Here's the thing. Do you think that Eddie Lack and Ryan Miller both possess the quality to be that number one guy in the playoffs?
I think Ryan Miller does. I think that you've seen that in how he played in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Recently, has he had that? Maybe not. Am I surprised by that? Absolutely. I thought he was going to flourish in Vancouver. I thought he was going to put Luongo to shame, to be honest with you. But he has regressed a little bit. I think maybe a change in goalie coach might be good for him. But, yeah, it's too early to tell. I think we'll just have to see how the series plays out. I think that Miller is the better guy, but whether or not he plays that way can remain.
It would honestly be astounding to see if, obviously I wouldn't want this to happen, but if Vancouver were to get a hold of someone like Mitch Korn to work with Ryan Miller, that could be astonishing.
I think it would be good.
But
I think having Miller play with his stint with St. Louis when he was traded at the deadline last year, I think him having that playoff experience definitely solidifies him as being a number one playoff goaltender.
But you're right, and that does make a lot of sense.
Because they played it.
The thing that you take from that, though, is St. Louis didn't stick with him as the guy. So,
I think, however, playing a team like the Blackhawks, like they did, like what happened last year when they made it to the Western Conference Final, I think they're always a perennial, deep playoff team. The Blackhawks are.
We've seen them in a Stanley Cup final against Boston. We've seen them again in conference finals against teams like Chicago. So, yeah, they've got the experience. And I don't think they're, like a San Jose Sharks sort of deal where they just can't get out of the first couple of rounds, or the Caps, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They can, but it's sort of year to year. And I don't feel like this is Vancouver's year. I think that and it might be a little bit of a ridiculous thing to say, but I think by virtue of me not hearing about them not being big league news, I'm not sure that they really, have the guns to take it.
Yeah, they don't have the high octane players that can just turn into all-star perennial players in the playoffs. So I see what you're going there. Also, quick update on my bracket. When when I made the point about St. Louis, Minnesota, Nashville, and Chicago probably being able to win against any of those bottom teams, the hardest of which, as William pointed out when we were switching during the commercial break, being Minnesota and Anaheim, who I still think if Minnesota got hot enough and stayed as hot as they were, and they were the hottest team in the NHL at the last stretch of the season, they could potentially take them in a 7-game series. That'd definitely be the hardest one of all of them. But I've just updated my bracket. I now have Anaheim beating Vancouver in the second round. Because despite me knowing how Bruce Boudreau has not succeeded in the first 2 rounds, I can't imagine any of these teams beating Anaheim. I feel like they're the number 1 seed with the easiest route to the conference finals.
See, but this is my rebuttal to you choosing Anaheim, is that I think if you take a Washington Capitals team that won the President's Trophy with Bruce Boudreau, how well they executed in the regular season, but lost so early in the playoffs.
Yeah,
that's the kryptonite, I think, is Bruce Boudreau, because you can't.
You've got to accept Anaheim's a different team than Washington is. Anaheim, I think, has the deep playoff experience that Washington doesn't really have. And I understand the whole Bruce Boudreau high-octane offense and how you're tentative to think that that can work. And I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, that is definitely the one pick that I am least sure about. And the more I think about it, the more I want to pick St. Louis, but I'm going to stick with the Ducks, I think, just because they can score. And I think if they make it all the way to the conference finals, they'll prove that their goaltending is solid enough that they can, stand up to what is a strong St. Louis offense, but I don't think it's quite the juggernaut that Anaheim is capable of.
And I think, Cabrera, you have Calgary beating them, right?
I do have Calgary beating Anaheim, yes.
Now, for me, I don't think that Calgary has that high intensity defender or goaltender, for that matter, that could stop a high octane offense like Anaheim. In fact, I'm looking at the goal differentials here, and Calgary is another one of those teams that leans heavily on goals for rather than goals against. They aren't a Minnesota Wild or a St. Louis Blues that only have 201 goals allowed. They're sitting right up there with Anaheim. They're 10 off of them, but still 216, 226. They aren't teams built around their defense. They seem to be heavily leaning on their offense. Calgary, a 97-point team this season, did not play great on the road, while Anaheim, one of the better home teams in the Western Conference.
The thing is though,
I think of the teams, I feel like Vancouver is the better matchup.
Cabrera, are you whispering into a cubicle in a library right now? Because it sounds like you're either telling somebody that their library card is expired,
or you're telling someone to buckle up for their flight to Tejas.
Let me explain to our viewers.
Our flight today is taking off at 5:53. Hope you all have your peanuts.
Here's the thing.
You're going to have to renew your library card.
I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. You're going to have to pay all your books.
My little brother is asleep, and he is on the other side of this wall.
Was he the one? Was he the one who picked Calgary over Anaheim in the second round?
And no, surprisingly, that was me. He picked everybody else.
You need to wake him up and get him to rocket.
Okay. Anyway.
Finally, I want to end this podcast. William, you didn't get a chance to talk about the big one that we're all worried about. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. in the Verizon Center on Comcast Sportsnet WUSA for our national viewers. Washington, New York.
No, it's just USA Network, not WUSA.
Shut
WUSA
up.
is Channel 9.
Hey, Matt, could you do that intro one more time?
Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at the Verizon Center on CSN with Joby and Craig. It's the Capitals, the Islanders, in the first round of the NHL playoffs. William, break it down for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yay.
So what do you want me to just kind of preview that first game?
Sure. Or even the first game, the series, whatever you want to do.
I mean, it's it's a little bit of a toss up. I think that you can probably say that it's going to be probably the East's most even series. I am reluctant to say that just because I think Ottawa Montreal is really going to be a very good series. Just because Hammond's playing unreal right now, and Ottawa's getting a little bit of their team back. But as much as it pains me to say as a Washington fan, I think it could be a long and back and forth series. Just seeing the way that they that they have played for the season series with overtime games and all that kind of stuff. A lot of goal scoring, and hopefully Holtby is going to be
the guy.
Game change. Well, he's going to be the guy, but he'll be the game changer for Washington. And from what we've seen at the end of the season for Halak, I pray that the Washington Capitals can get some gimmies on this guy, because if they do, I think that hurts team morale a lot, because the Islanders don't have a backup that's ready for it. And if Halak can't hold it down like he did against Washington when he was in Montreal, I think you could see Washington, and that's where I think a lot of these predictions that like Washington wins in 5 or Washington wins in 6 or something, that's where those things start to come in. If Halak can't control the puck and Washington's able to play what has become their identity in a hard-charging physical team, if they bully the Islanders and are able to get in front of the net, get traffic in front of Halak, and get rebounds, because he has looked shaky, I think, the last few games, that's where you see Washington walking away with the series. And I mean, if you couple that with, I would say, good defense. It doesn't even have to be great this first round, but if you do good defense against the Islanders, and that other stuff comes into play, I think you can run away with the series really quickly, because Holtby's going to be able to hold down the fort, I think. But you want to be able to limit Tavares and Okosa's chances and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Also on the scoring front, Islanders with an injury to one of their defensemen.
Travis Hamonic.
That's right.
Undisclosed.
It's true. So.
Yeah, no, he's a big one.
He's important.
Also, I was going to say, you were talking about physical, hard-charging game for the Caps. I was close to picking this as my X Factor. I'd say underground X Factor for this series is Tom Wilson.
That's interesting.
I think he's one of the guys that's important to the Caps' physical style of play, but I wouldn't say that he's the only guy. I think that you've got plenty of people that...
He's got a knack for riling up the other team, though. And that could be very important for frustrating a team that seems to play pretty well with the puck. And if you can make them start making mistakes, that could be huge.
Yeah. Well, yeah. All right,
I think
so that wasn't really a very good insight. But.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
What's the interesting stat? What's the surprising stat about this one, Cabrera?
I think there's a rumor. The most staggering stat.
Cabrera started like 3 sentences with, the most staggering stat about this.
Most staggering stat. I really have no control over this. I'm sorry, fans, but I don't want to wake up.
Wake up. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, I think...
I'm sure you're really putting a lot of people to sleep right now.
Yeah, I was just...
Well, we have fun.
I was just going to tell you that you need to cancel your library card. No, but in all seriousness, there's a rumor about Jarl Halak that he doesn't like to play old teams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's.
I thought you were talking about man, he must really hate playing against Detroit then.
He just does not play the original 6 well.
Or the Devils, whose average age is just
Oh.
55.
The Florida Panthers are by default like
if Ilya
73.
Kovalchuk comes back, it'll be 65. Kovalchuk. But
Kovalchuk.
Joke on your Jokelchuk.
Sounds like a personal problem.
Tonka truck.
Give me the Tonka truck. John was an NHL analyst. We got here Ilya Tonka truck. And he's gonna
I'll tell you what, Mike. You take a look at Ilya Tonka truck, number 17, top of your screen there.
He's got like the jersey like zoomed in, and he's got like written in red mark.
He crosses out Kovalchuk.
Ilya Tonka truck.
Tell you what, Chuck. Tell you what, Mike. Watch out for Tonka truck on this next series here.
Watch out for Tonka truck in this next series. He's ready to roll the world up.
Imagine him analyzing Curtis Glencross. You take a look at this guy, Curtis Glencross.
Take a look at this guy, Curtis Glencross, man.
Look at this guy, Curtis Glenparallel. He is something to behold.
Curtis Glenx. Let's take a look at. He was part of the Doritos Triple Extreme Nacho Explosion play that came in the first. He was part of the Pringles Nuclear Habanero Power Play.
When they put out their Locos Tacos package on the special teams, watch out.
When they went on the Sun Chips DEFCON 1 Nuclear Habanero Power Play.
Okay, well, I think that about concludes this podcast.
Thank you about this podcast. What do you think about that, Cabrera, huh?
Yeah, I make this podcast come full circle.
Did you guys already discuss the Nationals, or are you leaving that one alone?
We're leaving that one alone for right now.
That one for the next one.
They lost another one tonight.
Yeah, they did.
8-6.
Against Theo Epstein. Oh, wait, no, is it Theo Epstein? Yeah.
No, Theo Epstein is the general manager for the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, you mean the worst team in the last 1,000 years? Yeah, no,
But you just wait and see. My bold prediction is that the Cubs will make the playoffs this year.
That's bold, Cabrera.
Yeah.
Bold with a capital, bolded, underlined, italicized B.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for William joining us again. Thank you again very much to
little segment here where we talk about something random, something crazy or wacky.
Oh, first, before you do that, you wanted to say something about Chris Jakes?
I did.
Our last guest?
Oh my God. All right. Let's, everybody, okay. So,
let me collect myself here.
Yeah, let me put down my bag of Doritos Nuclear Habanero Explosion Tacos. And, okay. So, there's a little conversation going on last podcast about Alexander Ovechkin. Some really incredible numbers he's put up this year. Really great goal scorer. Scores a lot of goals. Great guy. Helps the kids. Lots of charity, and he puts vulcanized rubber inside their net. So, we're talking about this guy. And you guys were talking about him on the last podcast.
Yes, we were.
And,
with our special guest, Chris Jakes.
Little history he made. Scoring 50 goals for the 6th time in his career. Joins a pretty exclusive list that was run down by one of your guest co-hosts, Chris Jakes.
It's true.
Noted illiterate. And he was reading off a list of these fine gentlemen, well-known hockey icons in the NHL world. And Jakes gave us.
You want to go to a clip?
Yeah, let's go to
another tangent is done
right.
Because we are now going to go back to Alex Ovechkin, who scored his 50th goal for the sixth season. Jakes has the list of for us of players that have also scored 50 goals in 6 separate seasons.
Oh, yeah, it's a very impressive group. He joins Gretzky, Rossi, Lemieux, Lafleur, and Dione.
Wait a minute. Enhance on Sector D7. Can we run that back one last little clip one last time?
Impressive group. He joins Gretzky, Rossi, Lemieux, Lafleur,
right,
and Dione.
Oh! talking about Marcel Dion, one of the most famous NHL players in history, or you may be talking about somebody who advertises for OxyClean. Marcel Dion would be his name. Marcel Dione, probably some vagrant who lives in Saskatchewan. That was a really, really solid bit of research done by an NHL article that he pulled up on his Wikipedia machine. That was good.
All right, we're going to knock it down here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you again to Nick Scalco. Thank you to William Noga. Super awesome special guest this week. We will be back either between the end of the first round or before the second round begins. So,
sounds like a plan.
Thank you very much. We also might discuss some MLB later, but it probably won't until the Nats start playing well. All right.
Okay.
That'll be
See
it.
ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Random stuff in our bonus chat, like right now, that I just started just now after deleting that old bonus chat.
One of my friends who was in the boat, he was talking to I don't know, somehow we got on the conversation of bugs. We were talking about, just bugs and stuff.
Bugs and stuff.
He was like, yeah, ants with like their antenna and their anthrax. And I was like, whoa. Did you say anthrax? You maybe mean thorax, like the exoskeleton of a bug. Or did you obviously mean the thing that is sent in mail by terrorists? He's like, is that not it? Nope.
No, you're wrong.
It's not called an anthrax.
Cabrera.
I think I discovered you can fit the population of Vatican City on Peyton Manning's forehead.
I don't think that's too far off from the truth. That one right there. I got a good quote for the podcast listeners from the Not Danny Heatley the Not Danny Heatley.
Do we want to censor it? I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. Do you?
Do we, Cabrera? I don't really care, but.
Wait. Okay. Well, I'll
doesn't matter.
I'll vocally censor it.
No, go ahead. No, I don't care.
This one's from March 30th.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah. Holy bleep. Edmonton, Colorado, and Buffalo, Arizona tonight. Tune into either game for some unreal chips off the glass and defensive zone breakdown. Okay. There's also another one.
Truly some real barn burners.
Oh, yeah. Really, really good stuff.
Really good.
As in literally, like, the fans want to burn down their home barns after watching those games. Like, they just want to destroy everything.
I also saw this thing this is unrelated from the regular sports we talk about, but I saw this thing on Reddit Rowing, and it was one of the most popular ones of the month, and it was, everybody keeps telling me that Jesus rose from the dead, but they look at me funny when I ask what his 2K is.
That's funny.
That was actually pretty funny.
All right. I think I'm going to end bonus footage because this is a pretty long podcast. It's breaking the 1 hour cusp. We're at 103.
What? Stop, like, freaking out if it goes over an hour. People if they listen to this much of the podcast, why would they not want a little bit more,
Okay.
Hey,
listener, the reason you're still listening to something is because of William.
Yeah, well, and they'll come to appreciate it, and I'm sure we're going to get... here's one for you Calgary fans out there. This one's from another parody account, Boring Sean Monahan. Sean Monahan's one of the players in the Calgary Flames, and he's notorious for kind of being like a really regular, boring guy. And so his tweets are pretty funny because they're like really literal and matter of fact.
Yeah.
And this one is, "We're going to the playoffs. I'm happy. I asked some of the guys, and they said they're happy. Coach Hartley doesn't look happy, but he is." Guys like that one so much. I'm gonna go for the next one. This one was on April 1st. I told Joe Colborn that Lanny McDonald was coming out of retirement, and Joe said, "Really?" I said, "No, Joe. April Fools."
They're like anti-jokes.
Here's another one. Today's game starts at 2 p.m. Most of our other games start at night, but this one starts early. Monahan's also notorious for his favorite breakfast of toast. And this one from March 20th says, I called Johnny Goudreau to see if he wanted to come over and have some toast this morning, but he said he was sleeping in today.
Wow. Just some of the wacky things coming from your Western Conference finalists, according to Matthew Cabrera.
Yeah.
Monahan on March 12th. The weather in Calgary is nice today. I was going to hang my laundry outside to dry, but then I didn't.
Oh my God.
Joe Colborne dropped his water bottle during the game tonight. I laughed so hard, and then he dropped his glove. It was so funny.
The Wizards are in double overtime, by the way.
Oh, yeah? Who are they playing?
The Pacers. By the way, at the end of the first overtime, it's 85-85.
Wow.
Yeah. The end of the first quarter was 16-16.
Pretty crazy.
It's terrible. All right. I'm going to cut it here, though.
Well, okay.
Because we've been on Skype for a while.
All right, well.
All right. Good podcast, everybody.
Footage, everybody.
Yeah, nice work, everyone.
Shout out to Coach Cosgrove.
Shout out to Joe Colborne of the Calgary Flames, Dan Bilesma, who's currently unemployed.
He shouldn't be, honestly.
Shout out to Darren Detition.
No, he shouldn't.
Shout out to Darren Detition of the TSN staff. Shout out to
Jay and Dan. Shout out to Jay and Dan.
Shout out to Jay and Dan. Shout out to
you have one more shout out.
Shout out to Rand Paul.
Right.
Shout out to
last shout out.
This last shout out I'm gonna dedicate
to 3 more shout outs.
No. Yeah, well, I mean I could, but I don't think I'm going to.
Not today.
This last one, I think this last one. Let's see. Who? I mean, can we get some suggestions for someone who deserves this last shout out?
Well, you decide that, Cabrera. Why don't you give your one shout out? I gave my shout out to Coach Cosgrove, who I know is an avid podcast listener.
I don't know. It's kind of a waste of a shout out. That could be like a murmur out, maybe a sigh out.
Coach.
This audible.
Tom Cosgrove. Well, you forgot his surname. It's Tom Cosgrove the 4th.
Shut up.
Let's see, who's my special shout-out going to? My special shout-out will be going... My special shout-out goes to all the people...
Woody Allen, huh? Woody Allen. Give Woody a shout-out.
I'm going to give a shout-out to Hillary Clinton.
Why?
Well, you're a racist.
No. You haven't mistaken. Your party are the racist people. I'd like to give a shout-out to all the victims of canceled library cards.
That's a good one. That's a good shout-out.
That's a good one. Yeah. Good shout-out. Quality shout-out. I'm gonna use my secondary shout-out, which I have hanging around for to all the listeners of the podcast.
Found it under my bed.
All the listeners of the podcast.
Got a little bit of mold on it, but you can have it.
You can have it, listeners. There you go.
You keep that one. You keep that one safe.
Here's a moldy shout-out.
That's pretty stale.
Moldy, stale, moldy shout-out.
Last shout-out. 3 seconds. Go.
Everyone.
Snooki.
Bye.